So welcome, Sophia Warner. It's a pleasure to have you agree to do our motivation inspiration project and chat about superhero try and everything that you've done in your career. I mean, where did you start regards to how it all began? How did it all begin? Let me introduce Owen Lamprey as well, which is Owen's part of a school in Birmingham, Clifton Primary School, and a lead practitioner for health and wellbeing around Birmingham. Owen.
South Birmingham in the main, South and East Birmingham. So we represent 30 primary and 10 secondary schools. I've got a wide range of SEND and parasport events included in our programme of events, and that's run by another SGO who's based at Wilson Stewart in North Birmingham. So I've also got a son who's got CMT. So he isn't at the moment in a lot of parasport, mainly because the parasport that in the sport that he likes in basketball and table tennis isn't sort of stratified for the needs that he has at the moment. But I'm going to be looking in with Andy about that. And para table tennis, we've just got in touch with England para table tennis, which seem to be completely on the ball. So I've got a personal and professional reason for being interested in this. And I'm just absolutely delighted to be on a call and on an interview with you. I've just read a bit of your bio, and it's incredible. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Sophie Warner, where did it all begin? Where did it all begin?
Sport-wise, I think I had quite an unusual upbringing, but in my day, it's certainly more normal now. So I was pretty much the first disabled person to go to mainstream school. So I had a very mainstream, able-bodied upbringing, and my family were really sporty. So my parents kind of took maybe the tough love approach, which was try and make me do everything I wasn't capable of. So I used to get dragged out on cross-country runs when I was in calipers and just had surgery, and my parents completely ignored it and didn't really care for sympathy. And my brother was really, really excellent runner, and so was my sister was a good cyclist, and I was kind of made to try and keep up. And I got talent spotted running a 10K when I was I must have been about 17 or 18, so I was quite late to the sport, but by that time I'd been running able-bodied for a very, very long time, and I was rubbish. I mean, I came sort of pretty much last at all school sports things, but I still really enjoyed it. And then I took up disability sport when I was 18, I think, and I smashed it and I loved it. So it's I was really late to sport with people of my sort. And I think that's probably why I've got such a passion for creating events for people with disabilities, because I think that when I started competing against people that were made like me, I realised how good I was. So whilst I'm really into inclusion and making sure people are merged together, I think there's a real need to make sure you still meet people and compete against people of your kind. Otherwise, you never get to be competitive, because it's not very rewarding trying to do a sport against somebody who's clearly, an able-bodied man is never going to beat Bolt unless they're that talented. But, I just don't have the same faculties as somebody who doesn't have CP, cerebral palsy. So yeah, that's how it all began, and it kind of just built from there. Obviously, I then became a Paralympian, a 200-metre runner, but my love has always been mass participation sport. It's always been my hobby. First disabled person to complete the London Triathlon, and I couldn't get my wetsuit on. I couldn't get my wetsuit off. I couldn't get my bike down from the rack. I got really, really frustrated, and I wasn't allowed to have anyone to help me. So that's how the ideas sort of started to shape. So instead of moaning about it, I thought I'll go and make one for myself.
Fantastic. Thinking about, you started your career in 1996 and then went on to win 2 gold medals in 100 metres and 200 metres at the World Championships in 1998. You're going back to those 16 years ago, even longer now, and you say that, you talk about at the time of inclusion sport and disability sport, it was just your mum, your dad and your dog. How's it changed?
Oh my goodness. So then going out in front of 80,000 people at the Paralympics was quite surreal. And I think people don't really fully appreciate that. So when you do disability sport, especially pre-2012, you did it because you loved it. You did it because you loved sport. You didn't do it for any reason. You didn't do it for the glamour. You didn't do it for winning. You didn't win it for being recognised, or because you had a chip on your shoulder, no angry stuff. It's just pure love of sport. And so then when you then turn up to 2012 and it's changed, oh my, like, seriously, having people who have an interest in what you're doing apart from anything else, and stop seeing it as disabled people who are having a go at sport. They suddenly realise that you're massively talented, and that it's recognised as a thing. But yeah, I mean, not only the recognition, but I think the understanding, and I guess Owen probably sees it in the schools, where it goes from people not even knowing what a disability is to understanding it, knowing how to interact, knowing what that means for sport, and then it filters down through everything. So my life has changed on every level, not just through sport, since 1996. I mean, what a step change.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm going to hand over to Owen. Owen, have you got any questions for Sophia? Hello, Owen. Are you still there?
I think he's on mute, actually.
Oh, is it?
Thanks, Andy.
All
just
right.
waiting for you to stop talking.
Oh, sorry.
That's no problem. Yeah, I've got a few, Andy, as you can well guess. So obviously with your cerebral palsy, and you just explained how you came into parasport and how really you as a family got involved in mainstream sport. To be honest, that's really fascinating for me, actually, because that's the approach I've taken with my own son to start with. I just wondered, in your experience meeting other parasport stars, what's the difference in attitude between people who've had a disability from birth, had a disability diagnosed to them maybe in childhood that they've always had but maybe didn't have it diagnosed, and then maybe contrasting that to people who've been involved in car accidents or army injuries, for example, and then gone into para? How have they dealt with those situations in different ways?
So funny, because these are the really interesting debates we have behind closed doors. Congenital, which is obviously when you're born with it, and people who have accidents, we're like completely different species. So I'm congenital, so obviously I was born with what I have, and so I am just Sophia. This is how I am. This is how I've adapted. I can't imagine what it must be like to be able to use two hands. It must be insane. It must be like, what do you do with two hands? Whereas when I then meet somebody who can only use one hand for the first time, I watch them doing stuff, and I kind of want to say to them, "You're never going to be able to do that, because you're trying to do what two-handed people do with one hand. That's not what you do. You have to use your teeth. It's that, that kind of thing." So I think with that comes a different attitude as well. So I'm really resigned to what I am, and I'm very comfortable with it most of the time, except for when I get really frustrated. But people who come to it with an injury, I think you've got to cope with a massive amount of change. And I think I work so closely with the guys from the military as well. I've got a really good bond with that team, and the things like PTSD, post-traumatic stress, and your family and your loved ones all having to deal with a new person, because essentially you can just be a whole new person. It'd be really interesting, because if you had a conversation with someone who's not me, they might say the opposite. But I think, whilst I've never had the opportunity to be, let's call it, normal, and that would be quite nice, I still think it's easier for me than it is to take the big shock and then have to start to adapt.
Fantastic. I noticed that you're part of the Leicester University alumni, as am I.
How are you? Oh, brilliant.
I was there from 96 to 99.
I think I was as well, actually. I can't remember.
Oh, we'll talk about that later. But I just wondered what your sporting and non-sporting experiences were like at university as a disabled person.
So by then I was part of the GB squad, effectively. So I travelled to Don Valley every weekend and trained. And I had probably quite a different university experience to most other people. I mean, I had my fair share of fun, but the majority of it, I was Little Miss Boring, I focused on my athletics and came out with a degree which has proven to be completely useless because I went on to be an athlete. But yeah, so and I won university colours for athletics. So yeah, I was not your fun chum at uni, but yeah, and I didn't know sport as part of university. I was not really that comfortable, actually. By then I was very much a disabled athlete. And I did all of my sporting off-site, never used the facilities, and just never got involved in university sport. I just didn't feel like it was something that I wanted to introduce. I don't think it was particularly happening there. If it was, I was unaware of it. And then I was really surprised that I got university colours for my contribution to sport, because I thought, how do they even know? No one's ever asked me.
Well, I didn't take part in university sport either, but I didn't have the excuse of representing Great Britain on the weekend either. So I just don't think it was there.
I don't actually think it was there. I don't think the facilities were comfortable. So I think I went to use the gym once, but I didn't feel like it was set up for me.
And leading on from that, what would you regard as your greatest sporting and non-sporting achievement?
Oh gosh, well, my non-sporting one is definitely the superhero series, but that's kind of sporting, isn't it? But it's not. It's kind of getting it off the ground. And the first year I wanted to see 500 participants in the first event. So when sort of 1,500 people turned up, that was definitely it. So that was good. Sporting achievement, actually, it's always the ones that no one knows about, isn't it? So it will be probably the World Championships in 2011, where I got the silver and bronze, because we talked about 1996, 98 sort of time. There was not only was there a step change in the public's attitude, but there was also a big change in athlete capability. So not many people who were around in 96, 97, 98 were still hanging on in there by the time you got to 2010, 28, maybe 2008, because it went from being very much disability sport to being hardcore athletes. And so when I then managed to still hold on in there, and I must have been, what was I, 35, 34, 35, 36 maybe, and I was competing against 16, 17-year-olds and holding my own. And so coming out and coming second and third, I thought, okay, I can make it to the games. So that was it for me, in New Zealand as well.
Brilliant. And you've mentioned it already, and obviously Andy's heavily involved in the superheroes himself. My family are new to the superhero series this year. So what can I expect, and what new world will this open for my son and I?
Okay, so you're gonna be one of the guinea pigs for the at-home superheroes, which is obviously what we're launching this time. So what you expect to see, the things that we pride ourselves in is obviously inclusivity, and we adapt to all situations. So of course we've had to adapt to COVID-19. So the one thing that we take pride in is our medals, our t-shirts, and all the things that families take away to mark the fact that they've achieved something. So we've managed to achieve that. The thing that you're not going to experience quite so much is the day itself, which is really quite awesome. You're seeing, it's a bit like wacky races, you're seeing people any which way find their way around a course. And so some people are carried, some people are towed in boats. So you're not going to witness that, but what you are going to experience is a community of people who have challenges coming together, either fundraising or not fundraising, to find a way of staying active.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Sophia, and thank you,
No
Andy.
worries.
No worries, Tony. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so hi, Sophia.
Hiya.
Thinking about, obviously, when you finished your career and reflecting on where you carried on, I mean, what was it like to go to Rio and be part of the broadcasting team, and to actually be broadcasting in Rio for the Paralympic Games?
Oh, it was brilliant. I think I'm always going to find it hard to take my hand out of it. So it was very nice to be part of the team and actually see. Obviously, in Rio, there was a lot of my teammates from London were still competing. So it's just really nice to go along and see them, and to see Paralympic sport taking yet another step up. Because whilst it wasn't a home games, it was still, taken to another level again. So that was great. And yeah, I think I've managed to have every single experience now of being a para athlete. So, and I was going to say it wasn't such hard work, but actually I have to say it was some of the longest days I've ever worked, because I covered all sorts of sports. I covered archery, para triathlon, I covered track, equestrian. So it's a bit of a big learning thing for me, because once you're a track athlete, you're a track athlete and you don't know anything about anything else. So yeah, it was great.
Great insight. I mean, talking about obviously your marketing experience, and starting in 2015 when you started mass inclusion participation, and you talk about maximising opportunities in disability sport for that mass participation. What made you start? So, as I say, what was the first idea with Superhero Try?
I think so. I started to do some research. I was really irritated by my experiences of trying to do mass participation events, and I think it's different for everyone. It'd be different for a wheelchair user. We're not all one category, are we? So my experience was not being able to get my wetsuit on and off, and not being allowed someone to help me do that, and I just thought that, well, this is ridiculous. So I just started doing some research. Obviously, 13.6 million people with disabilities, 1.7 million people in the UK with disabilities do sport 3 times a week. And I'm just thinking, well, where are they all? Because I'm turning up to do 10Ks, 5Ks, and people are giving me I get a bigger clap when I go past, which I find really patronising. And I just thought, I'm quite bold, so I'm out here doing it, but I imagine lots of other people aren't. And I started to speak to friends of mine who had children with disabilities, and they sadly just said they were too embarrassed to take them to events to take part, and they just didn't feel comfortable. They thought they were going to get stared at, and they thought that people just weren't going to let them just be. And so I thought, okay, well, why don't I set up a grassroots opportunity? Because I also felt like I went from being somebody who was running 10Ks with my brother to being a GB athlete. There was no in between. I didn't get to be somebody, like people who do Tough Mudder and Park Run. They can drink wine all week long and then just turn up and do some sport. But if you're a disabled person, you go to the Paralympics, you represent your country, or you do nothing really. And so I think, if I'm honest, I went about setting up a Tough Mudder for people with disabilities. So we had our own platform. I think that's where my mindset was. And so I didn't really mind how big it got, but I just wanted it to be fun and a bit silly. I wanted to use my marketing experience to create all the drawings and all the feel good, rather than the serious nature of disability sport, which it can be a little bit miserable at times. I've been to plenty of events where I've had to throw beanbags into hoops, and that's not. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I just thought, okay, there's no point in moaning, is there? You might just say, okay, can I do something about this? I think I can. So I did.
It is, I mean, the first year I did, and I was so, as I say, it was such a privilege, and then to be picked for the celebrity team, and not 1 year but 2 years in a row, it was like, wow, really? And it is wacky. I mean, I do remember the first year with Laura Turner and Emily Campbell, and we're still in touch now, which is which is amazing. And the thought when I was pushing down on the 1K, and they were there right in front of me, said, "Come on, Andy, come on, Andy," and it really is such an inspirational event for so many different people and so many reasons why, And I think the idea of at-home superheroes this year will really, really embed that as well, because people in lockdown at the moment who have struggled, who will be going through trauma and anxiety. It's such an inspirational idea that surely now we need to push that even further. What do you think with regards to inclusion now and adaptive sports and pushing that even further in schools?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my mentality is always going to be, if the more people I can get to do these superhero events, the bigger I'll make them. And it's I think I've explained to you before, we don't operate like a normal event. It costs £92 a head to put everybody on the course, and we don't charge people £92. So what we do is the whole event is subsidised by our sponsors. So the bigger the event gets, the more it costs and the more money we go out and find to make it happen. So in terms of getting the schools involved, if there's 10,000 school children who want to do this, then we will find a way of making 10,000 school children do it. But at the moment, we've still got a bit of capacity. We were nearly full at Superhero Try last year, and then obviously we've gone to at-home superheroes, which is great, because we wanted to do this event anyway. The idea was always to have something so that people who had neurodiversity challenges or didn't want to come to the event, couldn't get to the event. We were going to be running these events from 2021, so it's just made us bring it forward. But yeah, absolutely. getting schools, getting children get involved is always going to be our objective. And I think people find it really hard to get their head around how difficult it is to get people involved. But there is no community of people that exists that I can be like, okay, I'm just going to put this on their forum and we'll get 3,000 people do it.
Yeah.
We're a really not joined up community. I can't think of a better word than not joined up, but we're everywhere and we don't exist as a group anywhere. There's not one set group of people where I can say, okay, that there's 300 participants over there, and you know, oh, and it's amazing to have you on the call, because we just don't work closely enough with schools. We've got about 2 or 3 schools who every single year put 50 kids in, but no one else. And we go to schools, and if you go to the headmaster or if you go to the PE department and they're not interested in this, or they think it's too difficult, we get nobody from that school.
Can I just come in, Andy?
Yeah, of course.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fascinating, because I found that on a personal level and a professional level, and not actually just in terms of parasport, but also in terms of mainstream sport as well at schools, in that there isn't always, certainly on a national level, somewhere where you can just go. So I've been looking for parasport basketball, not wheelchair. I've been looking for parasport tennis, not blind, not hearing impaired, not wheelchair. And, you know, I expected to just go to the LTA and then give me the answer. And it doesn't happen.
No,
and it's fascinating.
Really,
yeah, it's fascinating what you should say about schools. It's because 3 years ago, we just made a commitment to the school that anybody on the SEND register would represent the school, whether that was in parasport opportunity or in mainstream school sport as well, whichever, or both. And we're actually now struggling to staff the events that we're trying to get to, because obviously the staffing is quite numerous in the number of staff you have to take. So there are those issues as well. The sport premium helps. So whenever you're talking to schools, just mention the sport premium at primary level, because they've all got £20,000 a year to spend on sport, which perfectly would be suitable to spend on SEND sport. So what I find you saying there is absolutely fascinating. And I think perhaps what Andy and I and other SGOs are trying to do is spread that word and be sort of a contact point whereby, right, I need this. Okay, I can go to my SGO, I can go to Andy Craddock, I can go to Sport Birmingham, and we can get it done.
Yeah, well, amazing. And I think what I typically find is that I go to, there is no barrier, I think, which is the big frustration from my perspective, because I have people like, you know, our headline sponsors, everyone knows is Marvel, and they will, if I go to Marvel and I say, I've got a school, there's 60 pupils there that want to do it, but I need to cover the cost of them taking part. There's a pocket of money for me to put those people on the course. So I go to schools all the time and say, and I think I must have sent out last year, I've got bored of doing it now because I did it 2 years in a row, every single school where it came through as having a disability of any sort, and I offered them free places. So they won't having to pay for the places, and I went to the head of PE, I went to the head, I went to the admin, the office, and no responses back. I even did, and then I put a couple of days aside to phone. Yeah, I put a couple of days aside to phone the schools and say, look, you know, this is what we've got, this is what we want to do. Here's 9 places. It's not going to. You can fundraise for your school, or you can fundraise for your charity, but just no take up. And I think part of it is because it's a whole new initiative, it's a whole new concept, and I think that's quite challenging for some schools, and they think it's going to be an effort. But you know, the places are there. So if you turn around to me now and said, I've got 300 children across my schools who want places for at-home superheroes, we would get them all a race pack.
Wow. I do find it really interesting. Obviously, I've spoke to a lot of people, a lot of inspirational people over these interviews, and you know, I recently did an inclusion interview with Worcester University, and you know, with a student who's putting out a documentary in the next week or so regarding disability, focusing on in lockdown, but also disability sports, how they moved on. But I do think with grassroots and that massive participation inclusion, it's really difficult because obviously they're finding somebody to actually take on that mantle in the schools to support, and they haven't got the training for it. You know, what do you think really regarding bringing things forward and breaking down those barriers? What could we do as ambassadors, as people who've been involved in inclusion sport for so long? How can we move that forward?
Well, I think the superhero series is slightly different, and this is where the opportunity is. And I think there's some gaps here, actually, Andy, which we as a team could help fill. But the beauty of the superhero series is you don't actually need to train. And I shouldn't really say that, but the whole idea of Tough Mudder, the whole idea of all of those events is you can absolutely train as hard as you possibly want and can, and you can turn up and you can try and end up in the top 5, can't you? Or you can go and struggle your way around and then spend the next 2 weeks unable to move because you've overdone it. So, and I think the superhero series is a bit like that. You know, there is a 1K, there is a 150-meter swim, and there is a 3K cycle, and you can just do one of those things. You can walk the 1K, you can wheel the 1K. So really, it's just a case of being there and having the experience, hanging out with Adam Hills, hanging out with Johnny Peacocks, hanging out with David Weir, and being on Channel 4. You know, so you can just go along and eat some ice cream and just be part of the day. Or you can go along and you can say, right, I'm going to try and beat last year's time. So there's that side of it. So actually training isn't really an excuse for not doing superhero series. But equally, I think if our community was bigger and the event was easier for us as organisers, where all we had to do was put on the event and we knew that the participants would come, and we knew that we would be able to say to the sponsors, don't worry, you know, we've got our 3,000 participants, we've all hit our objectives, it's fine. If that bit was already taken care of, we could focus on things like special training sessions. We could have a superhero roadshow where we went out and did training sessions in various cities. We could go out to schools. There's the ideas that we've got to where we could get to the next level. They're all there, and I do recognise that there is a bit of a gap for people understanding where centres are for universities, where people can train, where people can use facilities. But in all, it's kind of like a snowball, isn't it? And I still, even though when you go to the events they are absolutely incredible, I can see that there is still a really long way to go with the building of that. And you know, we're just going into our 4th year now, which obviously COVID-19 has made slightly different, but it's been a big old struggle to get 3,000 people taking part. What you see on the day is a whole 12 months worth of work of getting those people on the course motivated, confident. You know, the phone goes the whole time with people worried about their child getting in the water. You know, there's lots of obstacles for people to overcome to get out there in the first place. I still think we're at early stages.
We are. Moving on from, obviously, you know, I know you're a very busy person, Sophia. Thinking about lockdown and thinking about motivation, inspiration, what would your message, I know we're coming out of lockdown and he's starting to ease restrictions, but what would your message be to everybody at the moment who's still shielding, who's still on a, you know, that fear factor is still there, and have those, you know, those anxious moments or the anxiety about what do we do next? What would your message be? And also to the NHS and the key workers, what would you say to support motivation?
I think the main thing that I found is, to start with, I tried to go against it all and just think, oh no, I'm invincible, blah, 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 this is all fine. Actually, I think the best bit of advice I got right from the word go that I ignored for probably the first month was about getting a routine and just really getting into something. So I've been really just trying to focus on a couple of things that I wanted to get done. I haven't been one of these cool people that's taken up cooking or learned a language, but I think my motivation to everyone would just be to think of something that you've wanted to do and just throw yourself into it. So I've been training to try and run 10K, which I've not done for, gosh, probably 10 years, because since I started training for 200 meters. So I've just started doing that, and I've just tried to focus on making myself get up at the same time every day. I've got 4 teenagers in the house, so that's not been so hard, homeschooling and what have you. So just try and just stay in a routine. And I think that's what I would say to everyone. Just really just do as you're told. Is my other thing, because I just don't understand why people can't do as they're told. Do as you're told, and routine.
Fantastic. And as I say, I mean, it is such a privilege to speak to you. And as I say, I do enjoy the superhero tries, and I'm looking forward to the at-home superheroes this year. We're still building our team. I mean, I've ordered my Spider-Man costume, so that's going.
Oh my goodness!
So I shall be doing my Spider-Man costume. One thing just to finish off with is, if you could think of a quote that supports motivation and inspiration, what would that quote be and why?
Oh my goodness, Andy, you're really putting me on the spot. I've got no idea. Give me an example. What are you looking for?
Well, I mean, a lot we've had from Sean Gash. We've had how to.
Oh, he's always so good. He always.
Well,
he's not a good one.
He did an analogy of sucking lemons, which I thought was quite good, because obviously, we all can suck lemons, or we can make those lemons into lemonade and keep going for it.
I can't top that.
I've had Calderwood on about, we need to give people the tools, and if you think about a table, the legs are the tools that we give people to make the table.
Oh my goodness! You must have interviewed them at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, not 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. I think, okay, go on then. My one is find something you love doing, and you'll always be good at it. That's probably it.
Fantastic.
Pretty good.
Sophia, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the at-home superheroes. Have a great day. I know you're a busy person. Owen, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we can start building more in Birmingham and the West Midlands to really push and support the superhero try in the future as well, and get more people involved. The pleasure. Have a great day, and speak to you later. You're all right. You take care.
Thank you. Bye.